In the exhilarating world of motorsport, Graham Hill was more than just a driver. He was a fearless pioneer, always pushing the limits of speed and skill on the track. From his early victories to becoming the only driver to achieve the Triple Crown of motorsport, Graham Hill's legacy is etched in racing history. However, just as his family felt a sense of relief with his retirement from racing, fate took a cruel turn. Join us as we journey through the life of Graham Hill, from his early successes in motorsport to his last adventure. Norman Graham Hill was born on February 15, 1929 in North London. He claimed he inherited his determination from his mother and his sense of humor from his father, who was a stockbroker. And both of these qualities were essential for enduring the hardships and dangers of life in wartime London, where Graham grew up during the Blitz. He spent his early life playing drums in a Boy Scout band, attended a technical school, and at 16 became an apprentice at the Smith Instrument Company. He even bought a motorcycle, but unfortunately, on a foggy night, crashed it into the back of a stopped car, suffering a broken thigh that permanently shortened his left leg. Then at the age of 21, Graham was called into the Royal Navy. Feeling like a fish out of water, he resented the compulsory service and, as a sign of protest, he deliberately broke the naval rules by growing a neatly trimmed mustache, which later became his trademark. What's funny is that Graham didn't pass his driving test until he was 24 years old, and he described his first car as a wreck. Initially interested in motorcycles, he saw an advertisement for the Universal Motor Racing Club in 1954 at Brands Hatch offering laps for 5 shillings. On a whim, he tried a few laps in a Cooper 500 Formula 3 car and was immediately bitten by the racing bug. And from that moment, he worked relentlessly to become a world-class racing driver. But his desire to pursue racing faced 2 major obstacles. He barely knew how to drive a regular car and couldn't afford the costs of racing. Determined, however, he bought a beat-up 1934 Morris, taught himself how to drive, and got his driver's license. After competing in a few races, Graham met Colin Chapman, who was just starting to develop his Lotus cars, and convinced him to give him a part-time job at £1 per day. And it wasn't long before Graham became a full-time employee and was given the chance to race. In 1958, Colin Chapman decided that Team Lotus was ready for Formula One, and Graham Hill eagerly joined as a driver for the team. However, the Lotus car proved to be slow and unreliable. And when little improvement came in 1959, the ambitious Graham made a bold move by switching to British racing motors for the 1960 season. At first glance, this seemed like a bad career choice, as BRM had a decade-long history of struggling in Formula One, with performance issues that only seemed to worsen over time. However, Graham was undeterred by the team's troubled past, and threw himself into the struggling team, working tirelessly and leading by example. His relentless optimism and hard work began to lift the team's spirits and improve their performance. And the turning point came in 1962, when Graham's efforts culminated in a remarkable season. He won races in the Netherlands, Germany, Italy, and South Africa, ultimately securing the World Championship. The dashing driver with the roguish mustache, cheeky wink, and quick wit was quickly acknowledged as a top-tier driver and became a favorite among the public. Yet, behind the charm and charisma, Graham Hill was known to have a fierce temper and was prone to severe black moods, during which he would lash out at everyone around him. These outbursts became more frequent as BRM's performance declined. Though he managed to win America's Indianapolis 500 in 1966, Graham felt that his Formula One prospects could only improve by returning to where he started. So, in 1967, Graham rejoined Team Lotus, where Jim Clark was at the height of his career. In 1969, Graham Hill won the Monaco Grand Prix for a record 5th time, earning him the nickname Mr. Monaco. The next 3 seasons were not very successful, but Graham's victory in the 1972 Le Mans race was monumental. This made him the only driver to win motorsport's Triple Crown: Le Mans, Monaco, and the Indy 500. Though history shows he should have stopped at this point, Graham's pride pushed him on, as he felt he was totally in charge of his own life. So, in 1973, Graham set up his own Formula One team, Embassy Hill Racing, but both the team and its famous driver struggled to keep up with the competition. After the humbling experience of failing to qualify for the 1975 Monaco Grand Prix, Graham announced his retirement as a driver. This caused a huge sense of relief, especially for his wife and kids. After his lap of honor at Silverstone, where he waved to the crowd, everyone was thinking, "Thank God for that." Graham had lost many friends in motorsport and had finally survived his racing career. But a few months later, tragedy would strike in a way no one had expected. Unbeknownst to many, Graham's thirst for adventure didn't stop at the racetrack. As if the dangers of racing weren't enough, he bought a plane and became the carefree, sometimes reckless pilot of a 1968 Piper PA-23 Aztec, jokingly nicknamed Hilarious Airways. Never missing out on a moment to fly, Graham flew his team to Le Castellet Airport near the Paul Ricard Circuit in southern France in November 1975 to test the team's new Hill GH2 racing car for the upcoming 1976 Formula One season. Although they were scheduled to return on November 30th, the test was cut short, prompting them to fly back a day earlier than planned. The weather reports indicated challenging conditions, but nothing that seemed impossible. So at 3:30 p.m. on November 29th, the group departed from Le Castellet and flew to Marseille-Marignan Airport for a stopover. Joining Graham were 5 key members of the Embassy Hill team: mechanics Tony Alcock and Terry Richards, team driver Tony Bryce, team manager Ray Brimble, and car designer Andy Smallman. Notably, photographer Anthony Armstrong-Jones had considered flying with them but decided against it, feeling he had already taken enough photographs, a decision which turned out to be a life-saving one. During the stopover, Graham checked weather reports for the London area, and an IFR flight plan was filed for Elstree Airfield, with Luton Airport as the backup. Earlier that day, Graham had sent his wife a telex message to say that testing of the car for the new racing team had finished and that they would be home that night. He also asked his wife to call the airfield at Elstree to remind them to turn the landing lights on, which she did. The plane took off again at 5:47 p.m., heading to the UK. 3 hours later, at 8:45 p.m., they got a weather report for Elstree indicating visibility of 6,562 feet and a cloud base of 300 feet above ground level. For most of the flight, everything went smoothly, but as they neared London, thick fog began to cover the area. At 9:19 p.m., Graham was informed that visibility at Elstree had dropped to 3,281 feet. And just 2 minutes later, while descending to 4,000 feet, visibility worsened to 2,600 feet. Cleared to descend to 1,500 feet, Graham faced a tense and challenging approach, and the worsening conditions set the stage for a critical test of his piloting skills. Unaware of his exact altitude as he descended from 1,500 feet into the fog, Graham likely focused on trying to spot the ground, searching for the small Elstree Airport, potentially neglecting the aircraft's instruments. This lapse in attention could have compromised their altitude safety, leading to a dangerous situation. At 9:28 p.m., the London approach controller tried to contact Graham's plane but received no response. Just 3 nautical miles east of Elstree Airfield and 130 feet above it, the plane's fate was sealed. The Aztec, already preparing to land with its gear and flaps extended, brushed the top of a large tree at 460 feet on the Arkley Golf Course, descended further, hit more trees, rolled to the right, struck the ground with its wingtip, and finally crashed into a small wooded area, coming to a halt near the second tee. The undercarriage of the red and white plane was then torn away, and jagged chunks of metal dangled from the trees. The plane then burst into flames upon impact, leaving the 6 bodies inside unrecognizable in the charred remains. Graham died at the age of 46. In the aftermath of the crash, an investigation was conducted by the Accidents Investigation Branch. Their report was published in September 1976 and revealed that the aircraft was unregistered and stateless, although it had been well maintained. It also determined that Graham's night flying and instrument flying ratings had expired and were therefore invalid, as well as other license irregularities. No mechanical defects were found that could have contributed to the accident. Pilot fatigue was ruled out, and toxicology reports on all 6 victims came back negative. Despite the thorough investigation, the exact cause of the crash could not be determined. Because the crash claimed the lives of most of Graham Hill's Formula One team, Embassy Hill, including Hill himself and driver Tony Bryce, the team was left with only deputy team manager Alan Turner and 2 mechanics. With so few members remaining, Embassy Hill could not continue to compete and soon had to shut down. Despite his untimely demise, Graham Hill's impact on Formula One and motorsport, his charismatic presence, and his adventurous spirit continue to inspire and captivate fans and aspiring racers all over the world.